Well, it is time for another episode of College List Deathmatch. Now, remember, the purpose of this game is to figure out if you have only one slot left on your college list and you are debating between putting college X or college Y into that slot, which one would I choose and why? So today we're playing with two really impressive contenders. One is University of Maryland College Park, and the other is Penn State University Park. Their names even are pretty similar, but we'll see as we go through the discussion today that there are a lot of similarities between these two, but there are in fact a lot of differences as well. The differences are more intangible, but they are definitely there. They definitely do exist. Now, as a little bit of a preface, the only way really these two schools could be competing for the same slot on a student's hypothetical college list is if the student is extremely strong and generally aiming for very selective colleges or universities to get admitted to, because the only way in which these two schools would really be in the same third of the students' list would be if they were both safeties. So we are assuming that the student is debating between Penn State and Maryland because he or she is in need of one more safety on the list, and those are the two it's come down to. Because if, in fact, this was not the case, Maryland is more selective than Penn State. And so if it's a weaker student, it's very possible that Maryland would be the reach and Penn State may be more of the possible or target category. So again, the hypothetical scenario, the college list death match that we are playing today is a student needs one more safety on his or her list and has come to me, as you have, to determine how to analyze whether to put Maryland College Park on the list or Penn State main campus University Park on the list. So going down the things that come to mind first when debating whether to put Maryland or Penn State on the list, both are land-grant state universities in their states. Both are in the mid-Atlantic. Both are big sports schools. There are teams to root for. There is school spirit. And they are large universities. They are large public universities. So again, initially, they have a lot in common. When you then turn to academics, they still actually have quite a bit in common. Penn State is extremely strong in business and engineering and biological sciences and communications. And Maryland is, what a surprise, really strong in business and biological sciences and journalism and also, I would say, government and politics and engineering, criminal justice, psychology. So there is actually a lot of overlap there between those two schools in terms of academic strengths. Beyond that, I would say that you need to dig a little deeper because there are big differences between the schools, as I've alluded to a few times. If you scratch further down, you will note that culturally speaking, the schools are really quite different. Penn State is in University Park, and it is a nice little college town, but it really is in the middle of Pennsylvania, not near the big cities that you may think of when you think of Pennsylvania, like Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. It is the middle of nowhere. So the campus at Penn State and the town are sort of, it's a symbiotic relationship, and there's not much else going on other than, if the college wasn't there, there wouldn't be anything there. In terms of Maryland, we are in a sort of really unattractive aesthetically uh, suburban area nominally, but it's very urban outside of DC. It's a part of Maryland and Prince George's County, which is just outside of DC. And Prince George's County doesn't have the best reputation anymore and hasn't for a while. Uh, there are, pizza shops and things that make it feel sort of like a college town, but it's not a college town. College Park, it is a urban, suburban, pretty unsafe relatively to the rest of the United States college area, uh, and it's sprawling outside of DC. So, even though it's Maryland, don't think of Maryland's biggest city of Baltimore. Think of Washington, D.C., and being just to the north of it. I would say that Penn State generally feels more safe and frankly feels more like a melting pot. Everyone wants to be Penn State. Uh, Obviously, there have been scandals in recent years, but those have largely blown over now, and people really take pride in being a member of the Penn State community, regardless of where they're coming from. They sort of all melt together and proudly don the Nittany Lion gear and are very proud to attend that school. Maryland College Park at times will appear that way. However, I would sort of liken Maryland College Park more to a salad bowl. Yeah. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of diverse people at Maryland, but they unfortunately often, maybe I don't know why it seems this way, but they seem to stick together. There are a lot of African Americans, there are a lot of Hispanics, there are a lot of Jews, there are a lot of New Yorkers and New Jerseyans. And all these minorities, getting back to the saddle bowl analogy, really do oftentimes, if you're sort of plunked down on Maryland's campus, feel like sort of impenetrable subgroups that are hard to mix together. And as a result, I think that University of Maryland feels socially more cliquey, and it's very likely to feel more isolated socially on the Maryland campus. So there's a big cultural distinction between Penn State and Maryland that I think that, obviously reading guidebooks about majors and school size and location and all that doesn't really capture. Again, I would go so far as to say that Penn State's pride is sort of deeper and broader, and Maryland's feels more shallow and narrower. There are times of great pride at Maryland, but I think that generally speaking, there is not as much. So then you have one more factor to consider, which is the situation you find yourself in. Do you want to major in one of the strong majors at one of these schools? If I was undecided in terms of majors, I would really probably come down to leaning more on the environmental situation of the school to determine whether or not it was a good fit for me. If I want to be in an urban, hyper-diverse area near DC, or if I want to be in a college town that's greener and sort of presents more of a unity of identity, those would be big things for me to consider. In terms of the types of students academically and pre-professionally, I would say that at Maryland, they seem to be more interested in the end goal of like, what is this major getting me? And there is a lot of resume padding and pre-professional development focus and self-promotion focus, I think, in the student population at Maryland. Whereas Penn State students seem more earnestly excited to learn and grow. And Maryland seems, again, more self-promotional and aggrandizing, self-aggrandizing. Beyond that, I would say that if I wanted business as a major, and I'm choosing between Penn State and Maryland, I'd probably choose Indiana. I no, I'd probably it's they're just different. I think they're both strong in accounting. I think especially uh, niche majors are stronger at one or the other often, and so if you really know you want to do landscape architecture, for instance, you really do want to go to Maryland. If that's really important for you. If engineering is a focus for you, but you're undecided about what type of engineering, I would say that you want to do Penn State because I think they have more offerings in engineering, even though Maryland engineering is strong. Uh, I feel like Smith is overrated. I think as a business school personally. That's just my personal opinion. But I would say that both business schools at Penn State and Maryland are very respectable. Beyond that, I would tell you that the Maryland Terrapin, of course, is a very cool mascot, and the Nittany Lion is as well, but I'm partial to the Terp, which is a turtle. Uh, in many ways, I think the distinctions between Maryland and Penn State are those that exist between sort of red America and blue America at this time. Uh, the With the colors sort of swapped from what you may be thinking. I mean, I believe that Penn State feels more homogeneous, united, homogeneous in terms of focus and of the student population and background, frankly, of the student population. It's by no means a conservative place. All colleges are relatively liberal, but Maryland definitely feels far more urban, diverse, both in terms of student interests and goals as well as background. Penn State, in terms of the application experience, I would say is a better application currently, but those can change from year to year. So don't base whether you put a college on your list or not based off of their application, but because every year the applications can change. But Penn State's current application for undergraduate admission is more straightforward than Maryland's. Maryland's, similar to the university itself, feels more bureaucratic and messy, and sort of loose ends don't get tied up as quickly on the application. Selectivity-wise, again, I want to really emphasize University of Maryland is harder to get into than Penn State main campus. So we are talking about a situation where they are competing for the same slot because the student is a strong student and both schools would be safeties. Right now, Penn State has a priority deadline of November 30th. Maryland has a priority deadline of November 1. But interestingly enough, Penn State starts notifying students earlier about whether or not they've gotten in than Maryland. So if you just want a safety and want to hear from it quickly, Penn State would be in the lead in that category. So those are things I think to just consider as you think about these very two interesting campuses in states right next door to each other. I think could not be more different, even though both are large schools and both are very impressive in terms of their research offerings, undergraduate major selection, quality of professors. I would say, though, that the Penn State undergraduate experience I feel like is a little bit more comfortable. I feel like Maryland's, especially as an underclassman, can feel very bureaucratic from everything I've gathered from students who I've worked with who've gone there. So with all this in mind, I also would say one more thing. I feel like Penn State is a little bit more calm and sort of chill, whereas Maryland College Park is a little bit more high-strung and intense and rough around the edges. So let me just, again, qualify this by saying if I'm really interested in a niche major that is extremely strong or unique at one of the schools, definitely pick that school that offers that major, because that's important that you're interested in such a unique major that school offers. But if I'm going in undecided, or even engineering, I would probably, for the experience of one or the other, and of course is not a factor because I'm not in state at either, and I sort of want the traditional college experience that you read about or see in the movies or read about in books or sort of heard from friends. The whole mythology of going to an American college and rooting for a sports team and being part of a larger community. I would say that the winner of this edition of College List Deathmatch would be Pennsylvania State University, University Park. Maryland is always close to my heart because I am from Maryland, but Maryland College Park is not, I think, as nice of a safety in that particular scenario as Penn State University Park is. Even though I do like the Terps and I do like the color scheme better at Maryland. But that is not a reason to go to college, and frankly, it's not as full of fans of the team at Maryland that are as consistent, frankly, as they are at Penn State. I think they're more fair weather fans at Maryland anyway. In any case, that's not a reason to go to school. The reason to go to Penn State is because the overall package, culturally and academically, I think is as strong, if not more superior to Maryland College Park, especially if you're undecided as to what you're going to major in going in. And that is why Penn State will win this edition of College List Deathmatch. Both are great schools. Research them on your own. Don't just take my word for it. Get a lot of different opinions. Visit them in person if you can, if they are competing for a slot on your college list. But today the winner is Penn State.